This episode of the SkyPilot Weekly Podcast is brought to you by WeVideo. Go to wevideo.com to learn more or just click the banner at the top of the page. And welcome to episode 2 of the SkyPilot Project Weekly. This week we're going to be talking about food stamps, the history of the program, and just how it's going to be, how much this program impacts low-income families and individuals. Now, the food stamp program itself was started in 1939 towards the end of the Great Depression and just before we got involved with World War II. The first administrator for the program was Milo Perkins, and the Secretary of Agriculture, Henry Wallace. It ran from 1939 until about the spring of 1943. And by 1943, World War II was almost over. There was a huge economic boom during this time, and it just wasn't viewed as a program that was needed. And then you skip ahead a few years, a couple of decades, and then you get the pilot food stamp program, which was started by President Kennedy in 1961. It ran from 1961 to 1964. At which point you have the Food Stamp Act of 1964, which appropriated about $75 million in money to serve about 350,000 individuals in 40 counties and 3 major cities. The measure drew overwhelming support from House Democrats. Obviously, House Republicans weren't real happy about it, even back then. And it took the program from a pilot program into a permanent program and a permanent service for low-income families and whatnot. Keep in mind, this was also passed along with Medicaid, Head Start, the Job Corps program, which were all part of the anti-poverty programs that were enacted during that time. In January of '64, President Johnson called for the permanent placement of the program. Of interesting note, one of the people who voted against the food stamp program when it was in committee was Bob Dole. I thought that was kind of interesting. And then during the 1960s and 70s, the program goes through a massive amount of changes and growth. By March of '66, it had already topped 1 million people in participation. By 1967, we were at 2 million. By 1969, it was up to about 3 million. And then starting in March of '70, it was up to about 5 million. Obviously, during this entire time, it's just growing and expanding into the program that we see now. There are a lot of legislative changes during the 1970s, including the Food Stamp Act of 1977, which really kind of streamlined the entire program and helped make it more efficient. Then we come to the 1980s, where the program starts seeing some cutbacks. There were a lot of major changes that were made to the program that were not good. They were just bad. And then, of course, also one thing to note, in 1984, Reading, Pennsylvania was the first city to use the electronic benefits card, the EBT card that everyone uses today. They were the first ones to actually use that. And then in the mid-1980s, we see more changes to it. And then in 1993, the Mickey Leland Childhood Hunger Relief Act was initiated. The final legislation provided $2.8 billion in benefit increases over fiscal years 1994 through 1998. It eliminated the shelter deduction cap beginning in 1997. It raised a lot of caps on income and benefit how much someone could get. And then in March of 1994, we have a new high for participation at 28 million people. In 1996, there were a ton of changes to the program that really contributed to the way we see it today. And then we go to the late 1990s, where the electronics benefit card was issued out nationwide and provided by private contractors to help administrate that particular program and to really help get it out. In 2008, the food stamp program goes through a massive change. It goes from being known as the food stamp program to be known as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, as everyone calls it. And then from April of 2000 to November of 2013, there was an increase in overall benefits for people because of the what commonly referred to as the Great Recession as a fallout of the housing market. Food stamps are important. They're very important to people. Without them, there would be a lot of starving children in America right now. Without them, there'd be a lot of starving families in America right now. We need the food stamp program now more than we did when it was first, introduced. There are so many families that struggle every single day just to put food on the table, and that food stamp program is what helps them do that. And without it, there's a lot of starving kids out there. With school districts and cities and counties starting to cut back on school lunch programs, they're cutting back on school breakfast programs. Sometimes those are the only meals those kids get all day long. Food stamps allow for them to at least get 1 or 2 meals a day at home. And it's a very good program. It does a lot of good. Walmart, there's a thing called corporate welfare. And what that basically means is there are corporations such as Walmart, and they're not the only ones. McDonald's is just as guilty of not paying their employees enough. These are multi-billion-dollar corporations, and they have employees that still need food stamps just to make it month to month. And I think that's a shame. I think it shows how much corporate greed plays into poverty and low-income families here, not only in America, but worldwide. And it's something that we're going to have to look at over time. It's just one of those things. The food stamp program is something that I've benefited from as I was growing up. I've benefited from it as an adult. There have been times when I've needed it. There have been times when without it, I would have been a very hungry person. Food stamp program is important because those families that do get it rely on it to help bridge that gap in their food budget. And the majority of people that receive food stamps are families. The elderly, children are the major recipients of food stamps or the benefit of food stamps. And without them, we'd have problems. When you have political parties that are trying to gut the program, turning into a block grant program, trying to change the way the program works, the way it was intended to work, that's a problem. And it's something that we have to be vigilant about. Food stamps are not a terrible thing. A while back, there was a YouTube video of a woman harassing a man for buying food for his family using food stamps. There has been a culture of shame around food stamps, and there shouldn't be. There's nothing wrong with a family that has to use food stamps. Not everyone is going to have the luxury of just buying as much food as they want. Sometimes they have to have food stamps to make it from the middle of the month to the end of the month, from the beginning of the month to the middle of the month. Just however it is they need in order to bridge that gap in their food budget. The political right would have you think that people who get food stamps are drug addicts, are lazy, or unmotivated, and that's not true. The majority of people that receive food stamps are working. They're the working poor. They're just families trying to get by. Are there people that get food stamps that are addicted to drugs and alcohol? Absolutely. But you have that in every walk of life. It's not unique to just people who get food stamps. It's not unique to people who are in poverty. Generational welfare is something that's going to be an issue for a while until we can get our collective heads out of our butts and start actually working on the real problems here. Because until we do, we're going to need this program, and there are going to be families who are on their fifth, sixth generation of applying for food stamps. And without it, they would starve, quite frankly. And there's nothing you can really do about that, other than the fact that we have this program that will help them. Yeah. It's one of those things that you have to have, you need, you're going to need at some point. Everybody knows someone who has food stamps, who've used food stamps, who've gotten an EBT card. And food stamps shouldn't be viewed as a failure. They should be viewed as a tool for those families to make it throughout that month. And there needs to be more education for people who get food stamps so that way they can make better food choices. Yeah, there are a lot of people that buy a lot of stuff on there that they probably shouldn't be buying. But at the same time, they may not know any better. They may just be trying to buy food that they think will last them a certain amount of time until they either get that next paycheck or they can make it to their next benefit disbursement. And sometimes they just don't know any better. I think there needs to be more education about what constitutes a healthy meal, and how to shop on a budget, on a limited budget. Not everyone has the luxury of having $1,000 a month for food. Some of us only have the luxury of $400 a month, $200 a month, $100 a month for food, and those food stamps help bridge that gap. Especially when you consider most people who get food stamps, if they were to rely exclusively on food stamps, would only be getting about less than $2 a day for food for the entire day. And that's hard to get by. That's a lot of top ramen. That's a lot of unhealthy stuff. And yeah, let me know in the comments on the website, theskypilotproject.org, what you think of this subject. You can get us at SkyPilot on Twitter and on Facebook as well, the facebook.com/theskypilotproject. Let me know what you think of this subject, and I hope to see you next week. Have a nice day.